All right, good morning, everyone. We are in lesson 9, and we call this 9A because we're just going to do 2 chapters instead of 4. So please say thank you. Yeah, because 2 chapters was more than enough to try to dig through this week, and it was so rich and so good. And quite honestly, very fun to make a switch from the old thing, which we had finally got figured out. And we were like, okay, I got it. Let's move on, right? So it's been really fun. It's been a opportunity to step into now the rest of the nations, those nations that are out and around and about Israel, and how God is going to deal with them and why. And so that's what we're heading into right now. So we're going to be doing days 1 and 2. That's going to be chapter 25 and 26 of Ezekiel. Okay? All right, so with that said, let's get started by talking first on chapter 25. I want to cover some of the key words first. Sorry, I should have taken some medicine for my throat this morning. I want to cover some key words first, and then I'm going to take a pause, and don't let me forget, because I can do that, you know. I want to go in and look at Deuteronomy 32 as kind of a backdrop to what we're going to be looking at here in this particular segment. It's extra. It's not in your homework, okay? It's just me. I forgot to open my Bible up, though. So you might want to do that. Open your Bibles to Deuteronomy 32. Where's Deuteronomy? There it is. And that way we'll be ready to just kind of skim it. We're not going to read all of it, but we want to get the gist of what's going on in that particular chapter because I think it's applicable to what we're looking at here, and it helps. I think it helps set the stage for the core of the message I think that's going on for us right at this point in this segment division that we're in. So the first segment division, which we've now completed, was God's word to Israel, specifically to Judah, and his judgment against her. He's already historically handled the northern tribes, and they were settled already through Assyria, and God took them into captivity. And now he has finished dealing with Judah about 120 or 30 years later. Now they're completed. So the last thing that was told to us on that was that little phrase where he said, and mark this day, this very day, right? Son of man, in 24, write the name of the day, this very day, the king of Babylon has laid siege to Jerusalem this very day. So what we figured out on our timeline last week was that was in 588 BC, and by some additional work, I looked to see that was, let me see, I've got it over here. The siege began, we know historically, according to my resource that I have here, January 15, 588 BC, and that siege ended 18 months later, July 16, 586 BC. And we've always talked over and over about 586 being the final siege being completed. But we started in 588. Now we're at 586 because we're at the end of it. How do we know we're now at 586 when we enter into chapter 25? Are there any time factors that are given to us, time references that help us to know we are beyond 586 and the...
I think because back here, God's like, I'm going to shut your mouth up until the survivors show up, and then I'll unmute you. So
Okay.
he's unmuted here.
Okay.
So
there's that. But what in chapter 25 tells us that this is after the final siege of...
because he said, I think, made them desolate when the land of Israel was made desolate.
So the biggest clue is that when he comes in and begins to chastise or rebuke and bring judgment against Ammon in that very first paragraph, where he says, Ammon has said, because this happened against my sanctuary and my land, the house of Judah, and it says in verse 3, when they, what? At the end of verse 3. They went into exile. So now they're in their exile. So that gave us the absolute on that. So you could write on the top of your page, we're now in 586, and we're just beyond that final exile push that Nebuchadnezzar had against Jerusalem, because now the other nations around her are talking about her. And in fact, the aha means what? What do you know about aha?
Used to express satisfaction or triumph.
Yeah, so they're feeling a victory in what has happened to Israel's fall. They're rejoicing over it, right? Actually, that's even said in one of the verses in 6. They rejoiced with all the scorn of their soul. That is aha. They are jubilant over the fall of Israel. So now what we want to do then is let's talk about the key words and so forth. Let's begin with our geographical locations, because those are probably the most definitive to help you make your segment divisions or your paragraph divisions in this chapter, right? All right, so what do you have for geographical locations?
Rabbah.
There we go. Ammon. Now, Rabbah is what? Is that a country or a city? Yeah. There you go. Okay. So, yes, you would want to mark Rabbah. But what is your dominant segment? Your country. You're looking at Ammon. Okay, so you have Ammon and Moab and Edom. And then the last one? The Philistines. Okay. So we have 4 geographical nations, right, that God is going to address here. And then to the side of that, then there were some cities that were mentioned that you should have marked and underlined them, and you could have done a word study on them and looked at a map to see where are they at. And in the end, what you find out is they're within the nation of that particular paragraph. Then there's a couple. Well, first of all, Israel is mentioned, and Judah, correct, which we know is the person against which they are making their aggressions. And in 4 and 10, there's another people group that's mentioned but not named. Yeah, those sons of the east. Did anybody do some work on the sons of the east to know who they might be? There you go. A nomad. I know. Say that one fast. Yes, they're nomadic people of the east. So who is the nation at that time in history that's coming down? Because who is it that has aggressed and exiled Judah? Babylon. So these sons of the east then are somehow affiliated loosely, probably, with the Babylonian kingdom, but they're nomadic, right? They're not the kingdom of Babylon, but they're in the kingdom of Babylon, and they're the nomads. Yes, right. That's a very good example of that. Right. Back. Let me go back and mark that. Yeah. Let me find it here real quick because it's on page 184. Ezekiel 23, verse 23. So 23:23. The Babylonians and all the Chaldeans. Now, see, that's very interesting because Babylon is the nation. The Chaldeans is the people nationality, the people group. And then it mentions 𝐿, Shoah, and Koah, and all the Assyrians with them, desirable young men, governors and officials of them, officers of men of renown, all of them riding on horses. So it shows you that within the nation of Babylon are these subgroups that are mentioned. 𝐿, Shoah, and Koah, they are tribal groups of the east. So you might want to put a cross-reference back to 23:23 next to your on your observation worksheet where it says that I'm going to bring those from the east in, okay? And that'll help you just kind of keep that straight when you're trying to look at it later. You may not remember that in years to come, but when you go back at your notes, you should be able to go back and look at that, okay? All right, what else do we know? What are some of the key words that you see in the chapter 25?
Because therefore.
Oh, yeah, because and therefore. Isn't that interesting that they're terms of conclusion? They're not exactly key words, but in this book, what do they do for us when you operate or work with them as a keyword? Yep, the cause and the result. the cause of the problem, and the result or the outcome of what they did. So the because and the therefore had to be marked. And I thought it was interesting. Kay mentions it, but I'm going to go further, a step further. You should always mark because and therefore, and for this reason, and so that, and because. I just circle them and color them yellow consistently on every single chapter I do. I never change it. It's actually one of the first things I do when I do my observation worksheets. As I'm reading through, marking the author and then God, which, you always want to get those marked right off the bat. I also mark these terms of conclusion, therefore, because, so that, for this reason. Okay, so that's just my little clue tip for the day on inductive work. Okay, so now beyond the terms of conclusion, what are your keywords in this chapter? Yeah, did you notice? And so many variations of it. Vengeance, you said, what did you say? The anger, wrath, avenged, and judgments, right? All of those are kind of almost under the same topic in this particular book, right? They all obviously have their own specific definition when you do a word study on them, but they're all speaking about the same kind of, what did you say, effect, right? The cause and effect. This is why I'm doing it, and this is what I'm going to do. Well, this is what I'm going to do. It's this wrath and vengeance and anger, okay? And did you notice some of these little parabolic type phrases in here? Again, imageries that were given to us in 25. What is the first one in 1 to 7? Well, first of all, aha. That kind of is it's a phrase. We don't use it so much anymore, although, I mean, we do say aha, but we don't usually mean it in the same way they did. This was a specific thing of saying, aha, I've got you now, and in a negative way, right? And then also in verse 6, you see it? There, you have clapped your hands, right? And then followed it with stamping your feet. So again, those are imagery statements, and in the Jewish Hebrew mind, they meant something real specific and very concise and clear to them. To us, well, we can clap our hands for a lot of reasons, and we can stamp our feet for a lot of reasons, right? So you have to look at the context in which it's been said and then come to your conclusion about what is it that they're saying. Well, that particular verse 6, has got a simple list in it. We don't talk about these real often, but we're going to have a lot of those in this particular chapter. Verse 6, it says, "For thus says the Lord God, because you have," number 1, clapped your hands. Number 2, stamped your feet. And, do you see the and? And number 3, rejoice with all the scorn of your soul against the land of Israel. So those simple lists are helpful. And if you kind of mark them in that way, that's going to help you later when you go to lay out your points of what's going on in that particular paragraph. That's how I did my chart for us this morning. It's what we're going to work on together. Okay. All right, so and time references is another real big one. Whenever you're doing historical records in particular, you want to mark your references of time. What did you see when you looked at those? How were they helpful to you, having marked them? Well, start with verse 3. When they went into exile, right? So what did that do for you if you did a little timeline?
Kind of tells you, okay, well, temple was fine here, it's not fine here.
Yeah. So that verse 3 said, so we had God's temple, right? And that is in 586 BC. Put you over here. When this happened, then this is what happened. Are you seeing what's happening there? It's really helpful to do that. Sometimes just drawing a little picture like that, you go, oh, I get it. So now I know I'm on the other side of 586 because that's a done deal. So that's why you want to mark your time references when you're doing historical records, because if you're smart and you slow down enough to take a look at your timeline, you're going to be able to plug it in and then they'll give you perspective. Okay, so there's the winds. And there's also statements like they have done this, or there's the opposite, I am going to, or I will, right? So all those are time references that let you know it's either ahead or it is behind, right? Or it's present, I am doing it, right? Okay. All right, so that's your basic inductive markings on your observation worksheets. Then the next thing you do is you say, okay, so I've got enough of that figured out. Now let's just jump in and say, what's going on the whole then? Because it seems like the geography is a big portion of this, right? How did you title this particular chapter?
This listed the three groups like judgments against.
3?
Four.
4. Okay. Whoa, you missed one. Get back down. Get that rest of the chapter in there. Yeah. Okay, so, and what had Ezekiel been told to do? Say it and prophesy against him. So I put prophesy in there. Prophesy against. And then you can just list them out in the order that you see them. You get Ammon, Moab, Edom, and the Philistines. Okay? Pretty simple, right? And literally that, I think that is a very good title for it. Now it doesn't tell you beyond geography what's going on, but it does tell you something really declarative. How does he say to prophesy? Against them, not for them, against them. So already you understand that this is a negative just by your title. So it really is a pretty good title. Okay, so let's go ahead and start back in Deuteronomy 32. I want to read just a little bit off and on this. In particular, I do want to hit 43. I'm going to make myself a finger place here so I don't forget this. This is they call it Moses' song, which I think is interesting. It's a song which sets forth, and it says the perfections of God, or I'm trying to remember what the other word was that they used besides perfections. The mercy of God, or the grace of God, or the perfect plan of God. I mean, you could something along those lines. So verse 32 says, give ear, O heavens, and let me speak, and let the earth hear the words of my mouth. Let my teaching, I love this verse, let my teaching drop as the rain, my speech distill as the dew, as the droplets on the fresh grass, and as the showers on the herb. For I proclaim the name of the Lord. Ascribe greatness to our God. That was the other word, greatness. So rather than the perfections of God, the greatness of God. Verse 1.
Oh, you're verse 1? Oh.
Deuteronomy 32, verse 1.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Now I'm at verse 4. The rock, his work is perfect for all his. Isn't that interesting? He refers to God as the rock. What does that convey to us? When you call something a rock, it is immovable. It is solid. It is present, right? So the rock, his work is perfect, for all his ways are what? Just. Now, I just want you to hold fast to that particular thought line, because this is, as we are going into looking at God prophesying against these other nations, as he has already done with his own people, he's made a judgment, and he is punishing them or disciplining. I like the word discipline best there, because it isn't a permanent thing. He's going to bring them back. We've seen that already. 70 years they'll be there in their discipline, in their timeout, standing in the corner with their nose pressed against that wall. And when God is done disciplining them, he will bring them back. Because why? Why will he bring them back? Because of the promises. The promises of God are irrevocable. Romans chapter 11. And he says, and in that day I will save all Israel. Literally, I'm going to pull them in, dragging and screaming almost, right? But those who will bow their knee, that 1/3 will come, and I will save all Israel. It is an absolute. He's not going to settle for anything less than his word being perfectly fulfilled. So, for all his ways are just, a God of faithfulness and without injustice, righteous and upright is he. Now, if that does not help to set the stage for what we're looking at when we look at the prophecies against Ammon, Moab, Edom, and the Philistines. When you and I talked yesterday, and this is why I ended up going here, because I thought, that's a good point. Do you want to share what your thoughts were on?
Well, so Katie asked me what my impressions were, and the judgment of God, the curse of God, was so profound to me. And it was, if you bless Israel, you'll be blessed. If you curse Israel, you'll be cursed.
Mm-hmm.
And so he has to curse them because they went against Israel.
Yes.
That I thought it just really, really stuck with me that that's the wrath of God that Jesus absorbed.
Yeah, that's powerful. That's a great place to go with that. But when the world reads this, they look at this and just go, that's a wrathful God. That can't be the same Jesus that we have in the New Testament. Do you see? Yeah, but see, they don't connect like you and I do. As Precept students, we've already made that thread, that golden thread that pulls all the way through Scripture. We've connected the Old Testament promises as being fulfilled in the New, and that the Old and the New are not two different gods. This is one God performing dispensationally, I love that word, by dispensations, history moments in time to progressively fulfill his word. So he goes on to say, after defining God as being faithful, without injustice, righteous and upright is he, then he goes to the they, the people, they, Israel in particular. They have acted corruptly toward him, and also towards the other nations. I'm sure that must be what this is speaking of. They are not his children because of their defect, but are a perverse and crooked generation. Do you thus repay the Lord, O foolish and unwise people? Is not he your father who has bought you? He has made you and established you. Remember the days of old. Consider the years of all generations. Ask your father, and he will inform you, your elders, and they will tell you. When the Most High gave the nations their inheritance, when he separated the sons of man and set boundaries of the peoples according to the number of the sons of Israel. For the Lord's portion is his people. Jacob is the allotment of his inheritance. He found them in a desert land and in the howling places of a wilderness. He encircled him. He cared for him. He guarded him as the pupil of his eye. So we've been talking about that idea of the eye being mentioned so many times in these references as we've gone through God's judgment against Israel, how God's eye took pity on Israel, even though they didn't deserve it. Their eye was lusting after the things of the world and the false gods. Okay, now I'm going to jump over to 43, though, because now, actually, I want to start at 39 because I've marked it off here in my Bible, and I don't know why, but it must be a good reason. Okay, 39, starting there. See now that I am he, and there is no God beside me. It is I who put to death and give life. I have wounded, and it is I who heal, and there is no one who can deliver from my hand. So sovereign rock. Right, the rock. Indeed, I lift up my hand to heaven and say, as I live forever, if I sharpen my flashing sword and my hand takes hold on justice, I will render vengeance on my adversaries, and I will pay those who hate me. I will make my arrows drunk with blood, and my sword shall devour flesh, with the blood of the slain and the captives from the long-haired leaders of the enemy. Rejoice, O nations, with his people, for he, God, will avenge the blood of his servants and will render vengeance on his adversaries and will atone for his land and his people. Amen. Isn't that awesome? Okay, I suggest you go back and read all of 32. Deuteronomy 32 is a beautiful picture, this song that Moses wrote it says Moses' song, which sets forth the perfections of God. He's the rock, right? And then that last one is rejoice, for he will avenge the blood of his servants. He will render vengeance on his adversaries. So when you're speaking of key words, that word vengeance then and revenge become very prominent subjects, do they not? Would you say then at this point that you can see behind this, there is this subject of vengeance and revenge? And is there a contrast of any kind that's been laid forth concerning that subject in here? What happens in verse 1 through 7? What is Ammon doing? What does the nation of Ammon do when they hear about Israel's exile? They're rejoicing over it, right? Aha, he says, against, when you said that, you said aha. When my sanctuary, when it was profaned, and against the land of Israel, when it was made desolate, and against the house of Judah, when they went into exile, you rejoiced over their hardship, over their demise, over their downfall, right? And therefore, what is he going to do? Now, there's the cause and the effect. Because you did this, now, therefore, what is he saying for? Yeah. So this begins this picture of the revenge of men versus the revenge of God. The anger of men versus the anger of God, right? And it's a subliminal subject matter that's going on back here, but you really can almost begin a analytical list on how do men respond when they feel that they've been wronged, or when they see the world going in a certain way and they want things their way, whatever that is. You can make this list. What motivates men? What motivates most people when they just have their eye on a certain prize and they aren't getting it, or something's getting in their way, or has been in their way, but now it's removed? Now what? Now they think, yes, they think now, good, that obstacle's out of my path. Now I can seize it. Now I can take it for my own. Now, so the subjects of what come up for us then, when you think of it from that perspective?
Their motivation.
Yeah. Greed. Jealousy. Pride. Yeah. Covetousness, right? They covet these things of other nations. So that's the backdrop that we're looking at. Really, in all of what we're looking at here in chapter 25 is this attitude of men regarding specifically which nation? Israel. Isn't that interesting? So now what we see is, by setting this pattern here in the very first one, we're going to see a pattern consistently then, that this is how the nations responded concerning things that pertain to Israel, how they felt about them, what they thought about them, how they perceived them, and by the way, most importantly, their God, right? And because of their attitude about Israel and Israel's God, this is what the people of the world were doing. That's being laid out in contrast throughout this whole chapter then to who God is and how God will deal with that. It's very, very insightful and helpful to pick that out. Okay, so let's take a look then, 1 to 7. And if you titled it, I don't know what else you did, but certainly you need to get Ammon in there. The name of the nation, Ammon or Ammon. Now, and specifically, did you pick out any one specific thing? I mean, there were quite a few things they did, and you can't use it all in your title. What is it that they did that has offended the Lord, and he does therefore this or that? They profaned his sanctuary? Yes. Okay, so how did you title your paragraph? Okay, that's good. That's excellent. Does that pretty much cover all of it, do you think? Okay, what else?
I just put a proclamation against him.
Okay, that's good.
Well, basically, they were against the house of Judah and the land of Israel.
There you go.
So
And that actually covers what,
against is everything.
right, and so that subject matter of they're against Israel or they're against the house of Judah and or both, right? And therefore, when they hit my sanctuary, they said, aha, right? Okay, we're doing really good. I like this. We're moving forward. And if you wanted to say, I think there's the end result of what happened to Israel is what motivated these people, right? What was it that literally happened to Israel that they're delighting about? They went into exile, right? Specifically, they went into exile. Yeah, yes, the land is desolate, but I think the event is they went into exile because God has exiled them off the land, and yes, now the result is the land is now empty, right? And therefore, it's a plundering ground for these other nations. Okay. All right, so anywhere along those lines, you can kind of work it out. You just have to keep reasoning through what you think is most important about what Amon did. I just put Amon who clapped her hands, because that showed the delight. And she said, aha, at Israel's exile. Yeah, it's a very long one. These are not going to be short titles. If you want to get in, for me, when we looked at each of these paragraphs, would you say you spent quite a lot of time trying to research each of these paragraphs? Me? Oh, you didn't? Oh, did you? Oh, you just know I don't care. Next.
It made sense to me based on what we had already studied.
It does, but you don't know the particulars, right? Unless you research. So,
Like what happened to that particular
yes, exactly.
we know that. So
Right, exactly. Yes, he was. Okay, so when I titled it, I wanted to be really as precise as I could in the title to say on the whole about Amon, what motivated God to come against Amon? Why is he bringing vengeance on him? Why is he judging them? And so what had they done? And then therefore, what did God do in response is my thing, right? So Amon clapped her hands and said, aha, at Israel's exile. So that's what God is mad at them about, because they took delight in the demise. And we would call that vengeance. But what does God say about vengeance? Also in Deuteronomy, by the way. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. Right? So God is saying, no, you don't get to take. Why would God get to take vengeance but not men? Why can God do it and it's righteous, but man does it and it's wrong?
he's just and we are not.
That,
And he's not motivated by human motivations.
Right.
Like, oh, I'm going to judge you because I want your stuff, or I think you've slighted me, or
right? And when you can, go ahead.
But all sin is against God.
Well, that's true. Ultimately, all sin is against God. So when you commit an act of sin against your neighbor, you've actually committed a sin against God on the whole, because it's his people. Also, when you consider who God is in comparison to who man is, does that factor in? Right. Yeah, very good. Big God, little man. And God has the bigger picture. God sees the end from the beginning. God sees the heart. He can discern the motive and the intent of the heart. He knows whether the place that they're at in their personal journey in life, even specifically, whether they're at a point of turning to him or not. And so he's waiting and watching, but we can't do that. We can't evaluate people's hearts, right? And so when we respond to people having stuff we don't get to have, or having positions that we have, or having more money than we have, or having an easier life than what we have, and whatever it is that we're lusting after in the world, right? The lust of the eyes, the lust of the flesh, and the boastful pride of life, whatever it is that is stirring us. God, on the other hand, he looks at things purely through holiness, through righteous judgment, right? So this is the big contrast going on in this particular chapter. So he looked at Amon and he said, you clapped your hands and said, aha, at the Israel's exile? Well, so and then I'm not going to write it all down, but what is the three-part? Now, here's another simple list for you right there in verse 3. What is your simple list? He said, because you said, aha, number 1, you said, aha, against what? My sanctuary, and against the land of Israel, and against the house of Judah. So there's your simple list right within the text, and you would mark that.
God against the land, against the people.
There you go. Right back to your simple list again. Exactly. So he said, aha. And then he says, because she clapped her hands, stamped her feet, and rejoiced with all scorn. We already did that one together, and that was in verse 6, right? Then he goes on, therefore, so we're going to write all of our therefores on here, because that's the part that Kay asked us to pay attention to. Okay, therefore, what? Now you get a whole bunch of references where he says, I am, right? I am. And what is he going to do? I am going to what?
I have stretched out my hand against you.
Let's see, I am. I'm going to add the rest of it on there. I am going to. Okay, say that. Susan, what did you say again?
I've stretched out my hand against you.
Okay, you're all the way down into 7 first. Back up into, and that's good. Now, we're going to go there. But let's get glean what's up in 4 first. So go ahead, Kristen.
Give you to the sons of the east.
Okay. Okay.
Isn't 7 kind of a list of what verse 3 says? I mean, giving them over to sons of the east as possession, kind of, verse 7 kind of defines that.
Yes, it does. Okay, and it does. But why do you think he does that then? He says, I'm going to do that, and then he repeats himself. Why?
Well, because he wants them to know just exactly what's going to happen.
There you go. He's getting really definitive, right? He's making sure he's adding in pieces of what he is going to do that is so precise and so declarative that what?
Well, when we talked about this before, when people go into captivity, it's not such a bad thing. I mean, they're not free, but they're not.
No, not for Israel anyway, yeah.
Yeah, they still get to live, they still do their land, do all that stuff, but down here in 7, that's not what's happening.
No, it's not. Because at this point, we're at a different kind of place. With Israel, when God took Israel into their captivity, it was for discipline. But this is not discipline. This is what? This is judgment, destruction, right? For God's vengeance. And in order to appease his vengeance, he pours out what? Wrath. That's not discipline. That's wrath. And there's a very distinctive difference in that. And that's why it's important to mark those key words, define them for yourself in your head so that you understand wrath is not discipline. When he works with Israel, he's judging her sins, yes, by removing her off the land and purging the land, right? And giving it a do-over later, 70 years later. But when he does so, he takes her out and he says, and in the prophecies that are made to Israel, when he's going to bring her out to judge her, her judgment is a discipline that's a temporary thing, and then he will bring her back and begin again. But with these nations, that is not the case. This, he says, is my vengeance, my wrath, which I will pour it out upon you. Okay, and so then he goes back, and so he starts with, I am going to give her to the sons of the east for a possession. Now, did you notice the distinction between possession and conquering? Did you notice he didn't use the word conquering? The sons of the east don't come in to conquer the land and take it from them. It's not a war of the Bedouins that came in and took it. What happens is, then what? Who does conquer? That God does it through a nation, right? Through when it says, and I will give her for spoil to the nations, you have to do your research then to know what nation specifically came in and did that against Ammon, right? But what we know is at that time in history, who's the major world power? Babylon. So it's probably Babylon, right? And when Babylon comes in and ravages her and brings this wrath down upon her head, then here come the little Bedouins following behind going, ooh, now we have a place to live. Do you see what happens? So it's the sons of the east are not the aggressors. The sons of the east just move in because they've now cleared the land for them to have a place to be. Okay? So I'm going to give you the sons of the east as give you, There's your double underline for that's a geographical people. I will give you to the sons of the east as a possession, right? So you, Ammon, I'm going to give you to the sons of the east. And then he says, specifically, I will make this place called Rabbah pasture. That makes sense, doesn't it? If you think about these sons of the east being nomad, Bedouin, transient, they've got animals that they want to pasture. As a matter of fact, that's what they do. They move from place to place to place, feeding their crops on the land, and that's what's going on here. Okay, and he also says about Ammon. So first he says Rabbah, which is a city. Then he says Ammon in the next part. It's going to be a resting place. Not a possessed place where they establish foundational homes, build buildings, establish a city. No, they're going to come in and pasture on it as a possession, meaning transient. Okay, they're going to be a resting place for flocks. And then he says, in conclusion to that, in verse 7, I think it's in verse 7. Well, maybe not. Let me look on my paper. Verse 5. Verse 5. Thus, yeah, you will know I am the Lord. That's so important because that is our major book theme.
For the nation, it doesn't say this here, but they're like, your God is weak. Like that's probably one of the things because Nebuchadnezzar just came in and sacked you all, so your God is weak.
Yeah.
Yeah, well now you're gonna know I'm the Lord. Let me show you.
Yeah, and what I love about this is what I think Donna brought it up earlier, but that when God makes a statement and he's getting the details down, and he's giving so many details so that when it is finished, because it's being prophesied right now through Ezekiel, in time, it doesn't all happen immediately. In time, these things are fulfilled, and when they are fulfilled, then they're going to look at what happened specifically to Ammon, to the city of Rabbah, how it's now become a pasture land for the Bedouins, and they're going to go, aha, and thus you will know that I am the Lord. So when God fulfills his word, he proves himself to the world. It's how he goes about showing that he is true. Is that not true for us as Christians as well? That when we, people always say, oh, it's just blind faith that you're following the Lord, right? You're just foolish and you're naive. But the truth is that it's far from that. We have such a specific God who makes very specific historical prophecies. That's just one way he shows himself to us. I mean, there are many other things as well. But specifically when it comes to the words of prophecy, prophecies prove to us who our God is in many ways. It proves that he's sovereign to do it. It proves that what he does has a deliberate design purpose. Remember back in, let me go back here. I think it was in hold on. I'm going to find it because I want to read it again. I should memorize this particular verse. I think I didn't go back far enough. Hold on. Because this is really, I think, a pivotal piece to what we know about who our God is. All right, I'm going to find it, even if it takes me a second here. I know exactly where it is on the page. I need to memorize what chapter it's in so I can find it easier. 18, help me remember that. Okay, 18:23 again. Do I have any pleasure in the death of the wicked, declares the Lord God, rather than that he, us, men, people, nations, should turn from his ways and live. So everything that God does, when he brings wrath, when he brings revenge, that is a God who sees all of it. He already has examined the hearts. He knows where they're at and where they're supposed to be at, and he also looks at the individual. And within that nation, there may be individuals. He will save them, right? But he looks at that nation and he sees them as a destructive force against him accomplishing his work in the world concerning what he said about who? Israel, his nation. I am going to do thus and thus and thus for these people, and then you will know that I am the Lord. And so here he's saying about Ammon, I'm going to do thus and thus and thus, and then they will know that I am the Lord. Because now that it is affecting them, now they're going to look at it and go, whoa, God said that about us, and now he did it. Wow, is that powerful? That is just such a powerful, don't let me forget that's in chapter 18, 23. That's a really good verse for us to keep in mind as we look at everything that we're looking at here. Okay, so now, I don't have room to put it all on here. I'm going to skip writing it up here, but the next part then goes on again in verse 7, another I will, and this is where you picked up, Susan.
Right.
He's going to do what?
Stretch out his hand against.
Yeah, stretch out my hand against them. And then he goes on to explain what he means by that. Now, just to stretch out my hand against you, that can mean a lot of things, right? But he makes it real specific, and he says what?
I will give you spoil to the nations,
Mm-hmm.
and I will cut you off from the peoples and make you perish from the lands.
Yeah.
I will destroy you.
I know. So if you could only say one thing, I will destroy you. Because do you remember when God told Abraham that they would have to wait 430 years or 400 years in their time of exile before he came back? Because why? The sins of the Ammonites has not yet been fulfilled. So what God had said to Israel was, I'm delaying for the sake of the Ammonites. Isn't that an amazing thought? Especially when you look at it in perspective too. He's made a promise to a specific people group called Israel in order that he can declare his glories to the world. He has to fulfill that, and he will fulfill that in order that everyone will know that he in fact is the Lord, because of doing these supernatural mighty works through a people that are impossible unless God is involved in it. And yet back concerning Ammon, he has said of her years ago, back in the days of Abraham, this is long before Israel got on the land and long before Israel had to go into her exile. We're all these hundreds of years yet later, and Ammon is still around. They were supposed to have been exiled off that land to begin with. What happened?
Israelites did not do what they were supposed to do.
Israel
They
did
let
not.
them stay.
They did not fully obey the Lord. Had they done what God had told them to do, Ammon would not be the problem that they are. And the land that Ammon was on would have been Israel's. Right? And they didn't take their possession like they were supposed to. So here he's saying, I will destroy her. Because I said to Abraham, her sins are now going to be fulfilled when I bring you back on the land. He not only did that, but he gave her another grace period of hundreds of years before this event happened, where God says, okay, I'll take care of Ammon. You wouldn't do it, I'll do it. As a nation, they were ungodly people. These were not people who were following Yahweh, right? And thus you will know, again, that I am the Lord. Do you see it in verse 7? So there are two of those. You should have marked those and highlighted those so that you pick up on them. Okay. So I'm not going to write the rest of that on there because I don't have space for all of the cool stuff, but you get the flow of thought there. Now we're going to do the next segment, which is 8 to 11, and we're on Moab. I know. That's why I'm trying to cut down on how much I'm writing. So this is another, the same exact thing. We want to hone in and crystallize as much as we can what it is that Moab did that God is so angry about. Whoa, what does that mean?
They're not special.
They're not special, okay. And why would Israel think they're special? And why would Moab think that Israel thinks they're special? Because of their God. See, it really goes.
They were special.
They were, yeah, they were.
Said they were special.
Yeah.
But they didn't do it.
So in essence, what Moab is saying to Israel here then is, you're just like all the heathen nations who have, by the way, heathen gods. Your God is no different than our gods, right? Or the God of any other nation.
Because people actually behaved like they were like every other.
Right. They were. And they had gotten to the point of idolatry so extensive throughout the land, which is why God had to take them off the land. I see it as a Noah moment when he had to flood the earth, so to speak. He had to wipe it clean and then start all over again. Isn't that interesting how you see these patterns in Scripture where God basically does the same thing, but he promised he would never again flood the earth as he did in the beginning, right? So in this case, concerning Israel, he just removed her off the land temporarily, so that he wouldn't violate his promises to her, and then we'll bring her back. And in that temporary time out of discipline, she is being purged and refined and purified to a degree at least, right? And then when she's brought back, Israel does not ever again go back to the degree of idolatry that she had in this day. Now, there's other problems with Israel, right? They don't accept their Messiah, for one thing, when he comes the first time. And they are, at that point in history in the New Testament, they're more about arrogance. We're better than other people. God called them whitewashed tombs, right? Teacups that are dirty on the inside, because they saw themselves as special and as elite in the world. But God looks at their heart and he says, you're no different than the world around you. But okay, so Moab has said then about herself, Moab, she said, Israel is basically just like all the nations. And that statement on its own is not as declarative until you really expound on it in your head. I made a list. She's like all the heathen nations. She's no better off without distinction even. She's not distinct. And she was supposed to be distinct, but she's without distinction is what they're saying. Her God gives her no benefit is also what they're saying, right? Because in the beginning, God did protect her.
So what they're saying really is your God's no better than our God.
There you go. You nailed it. That's what it really, you start up here with these bigger pictures and eventually you spiral down to the pinpoint messages. Your God's no better than my God. Your God's no different than mine. As a matter of fact, I put on here, they didn't acknowledge the Lord God's existence, his blessings, or his judgments. They just witnessed Israel being judged by their own God, and they thought, no, it's just the other nations coming against them. It's like people who say, it's just coincidence, right? It's just a coincidence. No. For those of us who have faith, we see every movement of God in our lives having a designed purpose. That's why we can get to healing. And we can start to have what do they say? The peace which surpasses all understanding will guard your hearts and your mind. God will give you that when you recognize the good, the bad, and the ugly, all of it. God is in control of all of it in each of our individual lives. And he's in control of the good, the bad, and the ugly in the world globally. So from the pinpoint position of my life, but also the bigger perspective of the world on the whole, God is absolutely concerned about the individual. I am his favorite. I got to tell you, that's the way I see it. God loves you, but I'm his favorite. That's what I always tell everybody. And I jokingly, of course. And I hope everyone feels that way. We should all feel that way, that we are his favorite. And don't you want to be the favored child of the Lord? Yes, and good and faithful servant is what we all want to hear from the Lord. And John says, the one who Jesus loved. So there's that, but then on the bigger picture also, God loves the whole world. He died for the whole world. He wants everyone to repent that they not die, that they should live. So with knowing that that's the perspective of God, that's his holiness, that's his righteous viewpoint on everything he's doing, he does nothing out of the kind of vengeance that we do. Right? So here we see Moab said Israel's just like all the nations, which basically was a demeaning thing. They were saying, basically, your God's no better than our God. Your God, he doesn't, for that matter, they weren't even acknowledging the Lord God existed. And in Hebrews, it says, you must admit that God is and that he is a rewarder of those that love him. If you don't, there is no faith. You must at least acknowledge that. And these people are not acknowledging that. So he says, I'm just going to put on here, they were denying. God. I'm just going to leave it at that, and that can mean a lot of things. You can have to expand on that for yourself. So they were denying God, and therefore, yes. Oh, I love that. I am going to deprive the flank of Moab. Okay, so there's the I am statement. I am.
They are going to deny me as God of Israel.
Right.
I'm going to decry the flame.
Yeah. Yeah. You think you're no that Israel is nothing special? That I didn't call her out to be my special people? Well, I'm going to make you also not special. You know, I kind of went through this. Look, this thing about the flank. What is that talking about? The flank of the Moab, the outside border. Okay, it's actually a metaphor. Did you guys know that? It's a metaphor about a man whose side is open to a blow. Okay, so like it could, yeah, guard your flank. Exactly, boxing term kind of. So he breaks it down into two things there. Where is that? Number 1, in verse 9, he says, I'm going to deprive the flank of Moab, number 1, of its cities, which are on the frontiers, and number 2, the other thing he's going to deprive them of, the glory of the land. And so you had to kind of decide what the glory of the land it was as well. Well, we know what the cities are on the flank, the idea of the outside borders, right? So that means their border protection sites are going to be taken away, right? Those cities that were on the borders that actually protected the whole interior of their nation, those would be deprived. They would be deprived of those. Someone else would come in and
I saw it all as the same thing, not different things. That the glory of the land of these 3 cities, and that's what we're taking out of here. We're
yes.
of its cities,
Well,
frontiers,
you're
glory of the
correct,
land.
but there are two applications. The first one is the flanking cities protect the inner cities. Sometimes your flanking cities are your glory, but in this case, there's a specific message about the glory of the land. Also, some of their flanking cities actually were also their glory, the glory of their land. And what does that talk? Did anybody look at that and do a word study or research on that? It was talking about the richest cities, which were the pride of Moab. Okay, you guys remember reading that. Okay, so it really has two sometimes your flanking cities are just outposts and they're regimented and they're there to protect. But in this case, their outside cities actually became their rich cities.
That's what I meant.
They're wealthy cities.
They're not 2 separate things, they're just those
No,
are
but
both the flank and the glory.
that's right. There are two aspects. Exactly. Which
I thought you were saying that it was 2 separate.
it's two aspects of what God is doing with the outer flank. Now, and there it says, thus, what God is going to do is Moab is going to experience what their accusation is against Israel. This is really interesting. Their accusation is Israel is just like all the nations. Oh, okay. You think so? You think there's no God that protects her? You think there's no God that provides blessing to her? You think there's no God that's sovereign over what's going on in her life? Okay. Well, God's going to remove his protection and his blessings that all nations experience, by the way. Someone go to Matthew 5:45 and read that verse for me, because I think it kind of helps set the stage on what he's saying here.
I was reading, talking about the fact that Moab was a city just right outside the promised land, and they were pretty upset about that.
Say that again. They're going
They were the city that was just right outside the promised land.
to. That's true.
And so they were upset about that. So their glory of the land was, they made these big, beautiful cities
To show off.
just as good as you.
Well, you know, that absolutely fits right within there too. Absolutely, the idea that that's why I was saying in response to Kristen, often your outer flank cities are not your glorious cities. Your interior of your nation would hold your most precious, exalted cities with all your wealth. Kind of like what we're going to get to when we get to Tyre, where their wealth and everything was out on this island, which was well fortified and protected. But in the case of Moab, I hadn't thought about that, but the idea that Moab basically was sticking their tongue out at Israel, basically, by putting these glorious cities, these wealthy cities, right on on the border so that as Israel's people would walk by, they could look and see all the grandeur that they had. That's interesting. I didn't read that, but that's a good point.
So what is Matthew 5? What?
Yeah, let's read Matthew 5:45. Have you got that one?
That you may be sons of your Father in heaven, for he makes his sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the just and the unjust.
Okay, so in Matthew 5:45, he makes this statement that he isn't just the one who blesses Israel. He blesses every nation of the world. And for people to get an idea that confines God to being the God of just a people group or a particular nation, and then feel jealous about that, is a really shallow understanding of God, how he feels about his whole creation and how he's working in his whole creation. The point to calling out Israel to be a distinctive people was so that the whole world would come into this relationship with God. Not to make them special because they're special, but to make them special so that God could show the world how good he is and how he blesses his people. And so because they failed in that, then the other nations began to have these really dysfunctional relationships with Israel, and Israel began to look vile to them. Remember the two sisters that we looked at, Aholah and Aholibah, and how their promiscuous ways and them coming into these alliances with these other nations, and eventually the alliance nations that Israel engaged with, which they weren't supposed to, they became disgusted, so to speak, with Israel at a certain point, seeing how easily she was bought and how easily, how the unimportant things seemed to be drawing her eyes away from their God and their principles, and they weren't principled people anymore, and so people began to be disgusted by them. So here in Matthew 5:45, though, what God says in contrast to that, what you really need to understand is God reigns on the righteous and the unrighteous in the world, meaning in the context of this passage here, Ammon and Moab and Edom and the Philistines, all of them had blessings from God. They just weren't acknowledging the God of Israel. Every nation of our earth should look, and when they see the rains come, when they see the beauty of the world around them, when they see the expression of love in the hearts of people and know that God created people, that should be a point of reflection point where they go back to the source of it all. Why are people loving? If they're loving, why are they loving, right? And people who are evil, why are they evil? Because they've rejected God who created them. So interesting to me how people want to blame God for all the bad, but they never give him acknowledgement for all the good. When you watch the sunrise, you see the oceans lap over onto the shore and the beauty of that. When you look at the birds in the sky, the beautiful flowers in the spring, all those things are the creation that God made for us, for our pleasure. And instead of rejoicing and saying God blesses us too, look at the land that we have in our nation, wherever you live, in your state, in your country. You look around and you say, these things are here because God provided. And that's what these Moab was not doing. He was saying Israel is just like all the other nations in a negative way. They were saying it in a blasphemous way. They weren't acknowledging that God gives rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. Rather, they were just saying, see, it rains on everyone. Eeyore, with this little blue cloud over his head, yeah, right? And that's exactly what. So, therefore, what God is going to show us now in the rest of that, okay, fine, that's how you feel about it. You're going to get to experience what that accusation is. You think that Israel wasn't special and that her God is not a God of blessing and protection? I'm going to remove all your blessing and all your protection. Did you catch that in there? That's just mind-blowing to me, how the cause and effect on this. That's why she wants you to have all those therefores. This is what you said, and this is going to be my response. This is what you said, and so what is going to be my response? He says, I'm going to give Moab, along with Ammon, right, for a possession to the sons of the east. Again, those nomadic people are going to come in and land on your land, and they're going to dwell there. and it says she will no longer what? Is that how it says it? Be remembered?
Well, it says so that the sons of Ammon will not be remembered among the nations.
Well, but it goes on and adds Moab in there, along with Ammon is what it says. Moab along with Ammon. That's your subpoint. You almost need to put that in parentheses because it's Moab that's going to be. She will no longer be counted among the nations is what the New Living Translation said. I kind of looked it up in a different translation because I wanted to really get the gist of what was said there. I'm going to give Moab for a possession along with the sons of Ammon, that's in parentheses, so to speak, to the sons of the east, so that the sons of Ammon will not be remembered among the nations. Now, interesting to me is how they kind of blended those two together, Ammon and Moab. I think it sounds to me like what he's saying is, and I don't know this for sure because I didn't have the research done on it, but maybe Ammon and Moab are these are the two sisters of Lot's daughters, right? So I think he's kind of joining them together. There's a relationship there genetically through the history, and I think that's why he does this merging. That's my guess, okay? Because he is talking about Moab, right? Because thus I will execute judgments on Moab. So he goes back to Moab in the very next verse. Thus, because I'm going to do this to Ammon, thus I'm doing this to Moab, so that he merges those two. And I think the reason is because they were byproducts of the same man who was Lot, and that's a relative of Abraham. Okay, so verse 11, so she will no longer, I'm going to put it on here the way they said, be counted among the nations. I thought that was a good way of saying it. It made better sense to me. And that's the New Living Translation, which is a very loose translation, but sometimes it's helpful to clarify in your head what's being said. Babylon is the conquering nation, but now these nomadic tribes from the east are going to come in and occupy these lands again as possessions, not conquerors. And then he says, and in doing this, I will execute judgments on Moab. Now, to a thus what? Instead of a therefore, it's a thus.
Yeah.
But it's the same thing. Thus what?
Will execute judgment.
Yeah. And in verse 11, they will, there we go. They will know that I am the Lord. Now, this is the pattern now we're going to have throughout the rest of this chapter, okay? You did this, I'm going to do this, and then you will know that I am the Lord. You did this, I'm going to do this, and then you will know that I am the Lord. That's your pattern in this particular chapter. Okay, so how much time have I got? Okay, not a lot, you're right. I do have no other, I know it. I don't know what to do. You tell me. Okay, 12 to 14 now is Edom. Again, it's our next land. And concerning Edom, in essence, what did she do that was so bad?
She took judgment.
Yeah.
Vengeance, and avenged themselves on the house of Judah.
She took vengeance against Judah. Well, again, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. But here we go. And that's, you could put that right in on this one in particular, because it's right in the title, that Deuteronomy 32:35. Vengeance is mine. And so what has she done? In verse 12, she avenged herself where? On who? Upon Israel herself, and incurred grievous guilt. Because she took vengeance, she incurred guilt. So I want to put that as one of our points. She avenged herself. Does it say Israel in 12?
This is house of Judah.
Upon Judah, okay. And incurred Grievous guilt. Now, I think it's interesting, too, that God gave us that little piece of information, because what he's saying here to us then about man taking vengeance is a bad thing. And we see that again in the New Testament as well, where he says, it's not yours to avenge, it's mine, right? So, therefore, I will also, God says, tell me, what does he do to them? Mm-hmm.
Therefore, they will act in Edom according to my anger and according to my wrath.
Is that in verse 13?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Edom 13 and 14? Oh,
14.
okay, therefore, starts this is what? He says, and therefore, what is God going to do? Stretch out his hand against Edom and cut off man and beast from it. I will. So there's another simple list in there. I will do this, I will do this, I will do this. And then he gets real descriptive. Teman and Dedan, they will fall by the sword. And then the next part, I will lay my vengeance on Edom. Did you see that what God is going to do in response? You took vengeance against Edom, so I am going to take my vengeance. I will lay my vengeance. There's a contrast almost right there for you. On Edom. In verse 14. And then we go to and all those other things that are said in there, how he's going to stretch out his hand, he's going to cut off man and beast, lay it waste, all the...
Explain 14. This is where I got a little confused. It says, I will lay my vengeance on Edom by the hand of my people Israel. How is he doing it? Because they're in exile now.
Well, so what does that tell you is going to happen? When is it going to happen? Further down the road. It's not going to happen immediately. It's going to happen at some other point. Does that kind of...
So it is, okay, that's where I got confused. I'm like, how is this happening?
Yeah, and
It's a long time before there ever anything.
That's right. As a matter of fact, some of these take hundreds of years before these prophecies come to pass. Some of them happen quickly, but some of them happen, and then we also see those events of ancient history are foreshadowings of what we know are going to also happen at the end of the age, where we are in history. We're starting to begin to see some of these things. But the real reality of the fulfilling of those things is going to happen during the days of the tribulation, which we are never going to see, thankfully, because we are going to rapture out of here, right? And so we'll be gone, and God will then lay real vengeance upon the whole world at that time. But back in history that we're looking at here, God is saying, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. But he's not saying, I am doing it, I have done it. He says, I am going to. And that leaves it open for time in history when it will be fulfilled. And all you can do then is wait to see. And now, fortunately, we live far enough down in history. We can look back, and we can, if you're a historical nut and you love to look this stuff up and read your history on it, you can go back and read how did God specifically use Israel to do just what he's saying here to Edom. He's going to use by the hand of my people Israel, I am going to lay vengeance on Edom. Well, specifically, there's one that's going to happen at the end of the age, specifically, right? But there's also going to be one that's going to happen somewhere on a shorter term basis in history, where God is going to do what he's going to do. Now, let's see. Let me get this on here. Therefore, see, you want the answers, but you want me to hurry. I can't make your mind up. Therefore, or actually it's a thus, isn't it? I missed the therefore up in 13. It should have been, I will also therefore. Okay, so we could say therefore, because that's back in verse 14. Lay my hand on them. Thus is the next part. Yeah, there you go. They will know my vengeance on Edom according to my anger, according to my wrath. Thus, 14, they will know my vengeance, declares the Lord. Yes. They will know my vengeance.
Did you put that on the chart?
What's that?
The chart we're supposed to do about then they will know that I'm the Lord. Did you put this one on the chart? Okay.
Kind of the same thing,
I
right?
know, I took it as the same statement, he just said it a little differently this time. They're gonna know that I am the Lord.
That's how that chart. Got it. Oh. Yeah, see, sometimes I have things come at me and my brain is still over here and I'm like, okay. On thus they will know that I am the Lord. I did. Did you see how I did it? Thus they will know my vengeance, declares the Lord, because he is actually saying it just in a different way. Yes, yes. So verse 14 goes on here, then they will know that I am the Lord statement. That is marked in the same way on my observation worksheet also. Okay, now we're going to do 15 to 17 and close this one out. 15 to 17 is on the Philistines. Okay. And what do we know about the Philistines? What did they do? Wow. Acted with revenge and took vengeance. With scorn. Okay, so that's my title. The Philistines acted in revenge and took vengeance with scorn. And therefore, what do we see? Now, I did a couple of word studies. Revenge and vengeance, just so you know this, I'm not going to write it down, they basically mean the same thing, and they're the same root word. One's just a feminine noun, the other's a male noun, okay? They both mean vengeance, punishment, retribution, to pay back harm, okay? Just so you have that information. And scorn, did anybody look that one up? Scorn means contempt, spite, malice, feeling of hostility and strife toward an enemy. So it's all a negative. It's not the kind of, scorn is a negative thing. They are angry. They are vengeful in this. The scorn is vengeful, not the kind of vengeance that God takes where it's righteous in order to set a wrong right and also to protect his holy name, right? To avenge his holy name. For people, when we do it, it's a scornful thing. So he is going to respond then. That what the Philistines were doing is they were attempting to destroy with everlasting enmity. Does that make you think of something today concerning Israel?
Like what's going on right now?
Yeah. What is it they always say in the Muslim world about casting them into the sea? They want them forever gone, right? So this is a long time hatred that's going on here between the Philistines who are in Israel then, the Philistines who are right there where Gaza Strip is, right, in that Gaza Strip area. And then he says, because they wanted to do that, therefore, what is he going to do? I will. Yeah. So you're going to stretch out your hand against my people and you're going to take your revenge. Now I'm going to stretch out my hand. Same thing he said up here. You took vengeance, so I'm going to take vengeance. You stretch out your hand, now I'm going to stretch out my hand. Okay? That's... All right, and he goes into detail to cut off these Cerithyites, whoever they are, to destroy the remnant of the sea coast. Now again, back to what God told them to do, go onto the land and purge it, and they didn't do that, so there were these remnants, which were the Philistines, and we know what a problem they became, thinking of David and Goliath, right? So the Philistines were still on the land. We also know of them in the days of Abraham when he had to go in and fight these giants that were on the land, and so they were in this case, he mentions these people called the Cerithites, I guess that's it. And it could be. Did you look it up? Oh, good. So it's a synonym to the Philistines. Basically, it's a subclass of their group, yeah. I think it's interesting that he says, I'm going to destroy the remnant of the seacoast, and meaning the Philistines. Okay. Remnant, those remaining after the former overthrows inflicted by Samuel, by David, by Hezekiah, etc., right? All guilty of godlessness. These were, the Philistines never, even when Israel came onto the land and really were living it in their glory days before them, in the days of David and Samuel and Hezekiah, if you want to call those glory days, but when they were doing it the best they ever did do it, even at that time in history, the Philistines never came to know God as their God. So they were always rejecting it. So therefore, then God says, I will rebuke them. Oh, this was interesting. I will execute with wrathful rebukes. Now, what's a rebuke? A correction, exactly. So what he's saying is, you actually did something wrong. That's why I'm responding. Where with man's revenge or man's execution of wrathfulness, it's always with selfish purpose behind it. They have a motive of I want something for me, or I just want, because I despise you so much, I just want you wiped out. It's the intent of the heart that's distinctly different. With God, he's saying, I'm going to do it with wrath, but it's going to be with wrathful rebuke because of what you did. It's justified.
I was just going to say justified correction.
Yeah, there you go. So God always executes judgments balanced by his mercy and holiness. In contrast, man executes revenge or vengeance by their flesh, short-sightedness, and without interest to God's standards. You know, they don't do it with holiness in mind. They just do it because they hate that person. All right. And then again, there's our repeated statement in 17. Okay, we got done with that chapter. Yeah, and by the way, he actually goes on to say, they will know that I am the Lord. And did you see the when in there? A time reference? Yeah. When I lay my vengeance on them. Okay. Yeah, we don't have a whole lot of time to do Tyre. But the good thing is this. If you haven't figured it out already, the next two chapters after this, chapter 26, is also Tyre. So what we're doing today is laying down the first foundation of insight about who Tyre is and why God is going to use this as a personification or a imagery, again, of something else. But we just need to see something historical about them that helps us tie it all together when we get there. So in 26, again, who is our major subject, key person in this one? Key nation, key person? Tyre. And this is what's happening against Tyre? Judgment, right? Judgment. I put with an S on there. Did you see that? Judgments of Tyre. Why did I do that? Because there's more than one. How did you pick up on that? What's going on here? He opens in 1-5 with kind of a big, it's like your overview statement. He opens 1-5 to set the full stage and giving you both sides of the storyline here. We see it break down in verse 4, right? About her, he says, I'm on the wrong page. Hold on. What is he going to do with Tyre in 1-5?
Break her down
Yeah, she will become that, a spoil for the nations. And how is he going to go about doing this judgment? There you go. I will bring up many. That word needs to be highlighted. Many nations against her. That's super important to catch, because by saying many nations, what have you just done for yourself concerning the rest of what you're reading? Is it one nation that he's going to handle her with? No. Many nations. Do you think many nations will all come at one time, or is there only one world power at a time? There's only one. And which world power do we get actually named by name in here? Babylon, in verses what? 6 to, where does it stop? 6 to 11. And it stops, because then what happens in 12? What is the word there? Does it say he again? No, it switches to they. So this is interesting, because before it's he. Did you catch it? His horses, his battering rams, his axes. He's going to enter your gates. He will trample your streets. He will slay your people. Then also they also tells you something. Also circle it, highlight it, because it lets you know, besides that nation, there's also something else. Also they. So how did you mark theys in this particular thing, in this particular chapter? As the many nations. So I put a little green flag on every time I make a reference to anything other than Babylon. Babylon is given to us by name. So that segment, verses 6 to 11, I marked for me, I just circled him with purple and colored in purple just to set him out. And then everything else I used a green flag on. And that helped me distinguish, as I'm reading my flow of thought, that in 1 to 5, he's saying, I'm going to use many nations to destroy her. 6 to 11, I'm going to bring Babylon against her, right? And then he starts in 12 to 14, all the way to actually just 12 to 14, the nations. And then he actually kind of talks about them in a variety of ways. What were some other ways besides just they? He talks about a group shall not the coastlands. So you see verse 15. The coastlands shall shake at the sound. Now, does that identify any one nation? No, but it's more general. So I put a green flag on it. That's in reference to nations. Other nations are going to shake at the sound of your fall when you do fall, right? And then in 16, how does he identify them? Princes of the sea, that's kings of other nations. And he says, and they will go down from their what? Their thrones. These are leaders again of nations. So I put another green flag on that. They, and the rest of that, a green flag. They will clothe themselves and such. And then in verse 17, the nations will take up a lament over you. Verse 18, the coastlands again are made mention. So starting at 12 all the way through 18, you can see references to, in a vague way, nations that are going to do this deed, but they're not named by name. They're not identified in any specific way. However, we have history that's been fulfilled that's going to help us to know exactly how God goes about taking this to its next phase. So in that, therefore, I marked judgments. That's why I did it this way, because it shows us that this is a progressive thing that God is going to do. He's going to start with judgment, and then he will finish it later with another nation. Okay? So one of the things that caught my eye was in one of my commentaries, it broke these paragraphs down by subject titles that are like subtitles. I'm going to give them to you right now rather than writing them, taking a lot of time. 1 to 5 is her sin. 6 to 11, her first attacker. 12 to 14 is the method of her final execution, or you could just say final execution, her final execution, that would be enough. 15 to 18 is the effect on other nations. And I forgot to do it on my chart. I got to go back and add it in. And then 19 to 21 is her doom. Yeah, wasn't that good? That wasn't me, guys. I mean, I picked up on that one from, it was either a commentary or a sermon I heard. I don't remember which one now, but when they said it, I went, oh, it must have been in a commentary because I was able to get every point. I must have heard it or read it when I was looking at a commentary. But I really liked the way that they broke that down. But that's not my titles for my paragraphs, but it's more like what's going on in there. The first paragraph is about what her sin was. So let's do our titling, though. We see 1 to 5. Oh, what did I just do? Yeah, I don't know what I just did. Hold on. 1 to 5. There we go. 1 to 5. I will bring many nations against her. This is her sin. And there's a word because. And she wants us to mark those. And why? What had she done? What was her sin? Aha. She did aha. You'd think these people were no ahas. No more ahas. Not if it's in a aha can be good if it's now I remember aha. I put my keys wherever. But not an aha when you see somebody falling, right? She said aha again in this one when what happened?
When the gateway of the people was broken, now it's open to me.
Yeah, when Jerusalem was laid waste. Same thing. Variety of ways you could say it, but all you got to understand is it's related to what was going on with Jerusalem and how she felt about Jerusalem, just like it was happened back here in the previous one, where she said aha at Israel's exile. Well, here she said aha when Jerusalem was laid waste. Same thing. Okay, so that sets a backdrop too. Then it's talking about Tyre in the time when Israel had just been laid waste, so that we're back again now at 586, or just shortly after that. And she looked at that and went, aha, right? She was happy also. So a lot of these nations were. And therefore, because she did that, therefore what?
I'm against you.
There you go. That'll do it. Therefore, I will destroy the walls, break down her thrones. I will scrape her debris and make her a bare rock. So I want to break this down in this way because it's actually a two-pronged thing that's said here to us. Number one, again, I will. It's going to be in purple because it's God saying this. I will. I always use purple for God and red for Jesus generally. So I will destroy. Do you see the specificity? I can't say that word. Destroy. Do you see how precise God is being here? I'm going to destroy the walls. And what else? Break down her towers. Okay, that's in verse 4. And then he says, and. Debris, yeah, the debris. Yeah, I know. See, some of these are words we don't use. Number 2, I will scrape her debris and make her a bare rock. I got to get this on here. And I will. So did you see the word and in between there? So there's two statements about what he is going to do. First, the first one is I'm going to destroy the walls and break down her towers. And then he says, and I will scrape her debris and make her a bare rock. And so what we're talking about is two different times in history. We've already said that we've picked up on that. Who is it that makes the first siege against Tyre? Huh? Yeah. Well, they is the first paragraph, but in the second paragraph, it's going to be Babylon. So if you keep moving in this, the they is a general, you're right. And that's what I'm saying up here. He does this. But then when he says, I'm going to destroy the walls and break down her towers, the first one that we see is going to be Babylon. right? So that we know that right now. So we're going to set that up on the board just as is. So we're talking about this is what he's going to do with Babylon concerning her. And then there's an and. And then we're going to catch the second part after we get through this outline. Okay, now let's talk about the next paragraph, 6 to 11. We'll have to do this progressive, little bit by little bit, in order to get the whole picture. So who is he talking about in 6 to 11? And how is she? Yeah, Babylon is doing these things. And when it speaks about what's going on with the peoples here in Tyre, how is geographical indicators? What is given to us there? Does it say where in Tyre and how in Tyre, or what part of Tyre is being addressed? Did you notice it? On the mainland. Oh, that's interesting. So what does that tell you? There's a mainland and there's an island. Because later, did you notice when you went over into the verses 12 and on, where water keeps being mentioned, and the sea and the sinking into the ocean, right? The deep and the great waters are going to cover you later. There's imagery about it given to us starting in 19. But before that, from the seas, on the sea, by the sea, and I'm going to throw your debris into the water. Okay, so what you can see then is there's two parts to this. One has to do with Babylon coming against mainland Tyre. Then later it's going to be another nation which is not ever mentioned to us, but we are going to know what it is by history. And it's going to be the what I call Tyre on the sea. Okay, because there are two things. He's going to scrape her mainland's debris and make a bare rock of this place on the sea. Also really makes a bare rock of the mainland as well, but specifically he's heading toward destroying what's going on the sea. So now we know there are two parts to this. There's the mainland Tyre, and then there's the island Tyre. The island of Tyre, if you do any of your map work, it was well fortified. It had high walls all around, like huge. I can't remember how many feet it was, like 10 feet or something, high walls all the way around it. Plus, it was a port. It was in the ocean, so it had ships. So do you remember what happens with Jerusalem when God comes against Jerusalem and sieges her in and puts ramparts all around her and sieges her in? What happens with that city? They get starved out. But what about on this place called Tyre on the sea? Much more difficult, because first of all, they have to get out to her, and if they come at her by sea, they can attack back, right, and defend her. And also, she can get out with her ships to go get supplies and bring them back into her island. So she's not being starved out. She can't be starved out. She has her resources. Plus, she's so well fortified out there and has been doing this for such a long time. She can't be, you're right. Well, she will be, but only by a supernatural work of God and what God does with her. So what we see then is the very first attack happens here in 6 to 11. So this one here by title is Tyre on the mainland. Is how I titled the geography of it. And then I gave it a title. Concerning Tyre on the mainland, what will happen? What's going to happen to her? And who's going to do it? Babylon. And what is Babylon going to do? Yeah. Break down the walls. He says that she will come down to the ground, right? She's going to do that. Babylon is going to do that. Where did I get that verse from? I didn't write it down. Oh, the very last, in verse 11. And your strong pillars will come down to the ground. So he's going to slay your people and bring you down to the ground. And Babylon is the one who does it. So something along those lines should be in your title here. And I just put the Tyre on the mainland will come down to the ground. And the reason I also used the ground on my title was to distinguish it from the Tyre of the sea. Right? Because this is the sea, and it's the ocean waves, but this is going to be the ground. That's the dirt, right? By Babylon. All right. She's going to be slain by sword. You can make all kinds of different things. They will come down, though, by Babylon. Then it goes on to say, and what in verse 6, when she comes down? Mm-hmm. On my observation worksheets, I box this in red and color it yellow just so it pops on my page really good. So he goes on to explain to us in 6 to 11, God is going to bring who against her, against the mainland? Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon. So he gives us his specific name in this paragraph, which is really cool. He will slay their daughters on the mainland with the sword. That's in 8 and 11. So he will slay your daughters on the mainland. Did you catch it? Which I think is really cool. So if you understood that there's a mainland and an island, you would be able to then figure out the flow of this. And it took me a little bit of time back and forth, and I looked at my old notes and they were worthless. I think I was in the middle of either grandma daycare. They used to call it MOPS, but I called it GOPS. It was grandmas of preschoolers because I had 2 grandkids living with me at that time. And so I didn't have very much on there. And I also think it was my first time through doing Ezekiel, and I was still a little bit overwhelmed by it all, which some of you may be. So don't be surprised by that. This is history. It's very detailed. It's technical. It takes a lot of work to dig all this out. So my notes from my previous homework did me no good. So everything here I'm doing is, fortunately, God has helped me understand things better at this point. Okay, so Tyre on the mainland, they will be brought down by Babylon. I will bring Babylon against you, is what I read. They will know that I am the Lord. Okay. He enters your gates as a city that is breached in verse 10. That again, that shows you it's on the mainland, and then you will come down to the ground in 11. Okay. All right. Now, the island then, however, what's the distinction between the island versus the mainland as far as why the mainland was able to be brought down right away by Babylon? Do you know how long Babylon was there trying to siege? Did you say 13? Yeah, 13 years. Babylon, who took down nations, right, came against this one little tiny spot on the coastline called Tyre, and tried to besiege it for 13 years. How long did Babylon besiege Jerusalem? Well, the first siege, he went right in, took them out. Second siege, he spent, was it like 8 years from the first siege to the second, only because he had given them grace, having put them under covenant, thinking they would behave themselves, right? They had a vassal king put in there by Babylon. Well, then the next time he came back, he gave them another grace period of 11 years. When he came back that second time, how long did it take him to besiege Jerusalem? 18 months, a year and a half. Tyre, Babylon, same country, was there 13 years and never got the island under control. Never took the island. They took the inner city on the mainland down, but the island wasn't taken down. Now, how is it that the island could continue to thrive and be so fortified? What does that tell you in comparison to the two? Where is the wealth? Where is the power? Where is the... It's all on the island. And so all their riches, all their elite, everything that made Tyre infamous in the world was from the island. The island was the source, not the other way around. You would think the mainland would be the source and the island would just be getting helped, right? But not in this case. Tyre in the sea was the prominent of what we call Tyre. It continued on. So even though Babylon tried to besiege it, they didn't. Now, according to historians, did anybody find out what actually happened at the end of Babylon? What?
When they tore down the cities,
Mm-hmm.
they threw all the debris into the water and built a bridge.
Well, that's later.
Oh, we're not there yet.
No.
Okay.
That happens by another nation, by the way. Now, Nebuchadnezzar may have attempted that, but he failed. He may have started to do that and tried to, I think I did read something like that he had tried to, but he could never make it work. He just either didn't have the time or whatever. But on a timeline here, then we started back here with Babylon right here. What comes after Babylon? Medo-Persia. This is back to our Revelations study. This is how we get this. And after Medo-Persia? Greece. Then, just because I have to keep going, we will have Rome where Jesus comes, right? All right, so here's where we are on this timeline right here, Tyre mainland. They're going to be brought down by Babylon. He tries to take the sea, the island, but he fails. Now, he doesn't utterly fail. He does put them under subjugation with a vassal king that he allows. In other words, I'm going to give you permission to have your own king, and I'll just leave you there. In order to save face, probably. He just walked away and said, okay, as long as y'all behave yourself. And he walks away. Well, guess what? It is years then. Yeah, all over here. Who comes? There you go, Alexander. Alexander the Great. He's the one then that comes against the island. And he really devoted a lot of time and energy. I mean, I can't remember how many years, but it was quite a few years also. But what did he do differently, Carol, is what you were alluding to. What did Alexander the Great actually accomplish? He took the debris and did what with it? He built a bridge, right? So they call it a mole. I have no idea why they call it that. They also call it a causeway. But they just took a causeway made better sense to me, but a mole, I've never heard of that. But that's what's on all my maps. So because the mainland Tyre had been destroyed already previously by Babylon, there was really nothing there. And so when Alexander the Great came and he had heard about Tyre, of course, and they are still world famous all the way down here in the days of Greece. This island was so secure and so prominent. And we saw some of that. These people, they're going to cause a lament to be sung over these people because of what is going to happen. They're going to groan about it. Does that remind you of something we saw in Revelation when Babylon falls? They have the merchants and the businesses, and they're going to weep and wail, and how Babylon will fall in one day. Here again, another foreshadowing of what God can do when he sets his mind on doing that. So all these years later, then Alexander the Great will come up, and he is the one who is going to be accomplishing this next part. So 6 to 11, now 12 to 14. Are we going to get through this, do you think, maybe? Close? Oh, I'm getting close. I'm really rushing through this, as you can see. I'm not giving you all the big details. But in 6 to 11, though, the mainland is going to come down by Babylon, and they will know that I am the Lord. Then we get into the next segment, which is 12 to 14. This is the method of her final execution. This is the method. Now, what's going to happen to Tyre of the Sea? Because now we're into the new one, Tyre of the Sea. You could say island if you wanted to, but the words in the text calls her on the sea. What does it say that's going to happen to her in the end? Yes. Silence the sound of your song. And did you see in verse 14 how it mimics what's said in verse 4? Did y'all catch that? The bare rock. That's why I could see a segment division on that. Oh my gosh, the bare rock thing again. That's interesting because I see the bare rock over here. So although, yes, the mainland, so to speak, becomes a bare rock, but it's not really a bare rock. It's really more of dust. It's to the ground. The bare rock, technically, is speaking the island, which is a rock, and that's That's what it's founded on. That's why it's also so solid. The waves can come and everything. You remember the New Testament analogy about build your house upon the rock rather than on the sand, because it can withstand the weather and the rain that comes down? Well, that's why this island was so secure. It was built on a rock. And so here what we're seeing then is this next segment. He goes into how she's going to be made a bare rock and a place for the spreading of nets, right? Tyre of the sea. Nope. Let me see, where are you seeing it? They also gives you your new segment, also tells you that I was talking about all this stuff concerning Babylon and the mainland, but now verse 12, also he switched from he to they. So you're in a new, your whole mind has to draw a line right there and say, okay, now we're talking a whole different time in history in this case. I will make a spoil of your riches, Tyre's riches, which is, they're both called Tyre. It's just as the Tyre proper, and then there's the island. And the island was really the wealthy one and the real fortified one. So they will make a spoil of your riches and a prey of your merchandise, and break down your walls and destroy your pleasant houses, and throw your stones and your timbers and your debris where? Into the water. So
But I didn't think until we did all this of the mainland,
they will. It's both true. It's both true. You're right. They took some of the debris. They took the debris from the mainland and threw it into the water. But once they did that and got out there, then they took that island and did the same thing and threw it into the water. So both is true. Mainland stuff, their debris, gets made into a moat. Once they get out there, now they get to them, and now they remove their timbers. They remove all their pleasant houses. They throw their stones into the water. Not onto the ground, into the water. So yes, so that shows you're now at a new place in history. You've moved from mainland in that number 1, I will destroy the walls and break down her towers. That's Babylon destroying the mainland. And I will scrape her debris and make her a bare rock is the one on the sea. Okay, so showing you both. And that's what helped me make the connection when I saw that phrase about the bare rock part. And I saw, oh, that's the repeated statement here. So you can connect verse 4 over to verse 14. Okay, I will make you a bare rock, and you will be a place for the spreading of nets. They're not going to take the spreading of their nets and go all the way inland and lay them on the dirt. They're going to lay them on the rock, which is the island that's going to be made bare. Okay? Yep, that's exactly what it's going to be. Yeah, you will be a bare rock for spreading of nets. And you do have to do an awful lot of reading to get all these pieces together. And you have to pick up on the distinguishing how he has a whole paragraph about Babylon, he. Then it switches to also they. And now you know you're into a new time in history, okay? And we know that also because we have the advantage of having history completed and we can look back on it. We also know then that over here, Greece is going to take care of the island. Over here, it was the ground, not it was the mainland. But over here, it's going to be the island, okay? All right, did that help you, Carol? Yep, technically we're speaking about Alexander the Great when he comes. Now, along the history line, there were many other nations that also came against that island and wanted to conquer her. They just were not successful. But the ultimate one that does succeed is Alexander the Great in Greece. Okay? So in your history, you're going to say, oh, well, they came against her. Yeah, but they didn't take her down. Oh, but they came against her. Yeah, but they didn't take her down. Who took her down? Alexander the Great. And what he had to do that was phenomenal. I don't remember how many years. I don't think I wrote it down, but like 8 or 9 years of pouring debris, and also building bulwarks or whatever they're called, where they would cover them with tarps to protect their people from the shooting arrows from the island. And also he because Alexander the Great was an inland king, not a seafaring king. He had to, when he was sweeping through and procuring nation conquerings, he also then procured ships, people that could work the ships. And he ordered those people he conquered then to start attacking the island from the sea. So they had attacks on them from the sea because of Alexander the Great's conquering that he had already done. In the meantime, Alexander is on the ground throwing debris and building this moat to get out there, and he succeeded. It just took a long time. I mean, that man was ticked. He stayed there long enough to finish the job. He was not going to take the same defeat that Babylon took. He said, no, I'm not walking away from this. I am conquering. And when we did our Daniel study and we looked at the swift leopard with wings, right? And how he swept across just so expeditiously and just wiped everything out. That's what he was doing. But Tyre was like this thorn in his side, and he was not going to take no for an answer. So he stuck it out until he got that moat built, and he took them down then. Okay, so it's going to be, they will be made spoil for your, they will make a spoil of your riches and merchandise. That's another reason we know it's talking about the island, because their riches were in the island. They weren't on the mainland. The mainland benefited from the riches of the island, okay? I will throw stones, timber, and debris into the water. From the mainland, they're going to throw it into the water. That's what Alexander the Great did. Painstakingly made a causeway from the mainland to the island to cross on and attack her. He also brought in a fleet of ships to attack and wear her down. He conquered the island of Tyre. Babylon did not. So I've got that all in my little teeny weeny notes. I hope you got good glasses because it's real small. Then he says, I will silence your song. I will make you a bare rock. You will be a place for the spreading of nets. And then in 4, what does he say about her in concluding? 14. Yeah, 14. Yep. You will be built
Celeste typed on here.
no more.
333 BCE that they were conquered.
Oh, good. 333 BC. And that would be Alexander. 333 BC. That's good. I didn't get that one, that piece of information. Super. Okay. And then he says you will be built no more. And again, your conclusion statement. I, the Lord, have spoken. Okay, and that's another phrase that I marked off in the same way as you will know that I am the Lord. I think it's interesting because they had tried to do it before, and now it finally gets done. And all those years in between, don't you know, they're all saying, see, God's word's not true. See, he didn't do what he said he was going to do. See, it didn't happen. That is exactly what we're having going on in our world today. See, God's not ever coming back. See, no, the church isn't. The church is Israel today. They've replaced Israel. No, we have not. We are not a replacement for Israel. Israel is Israel. The church is the bride of Christ. Israel is the wife of God. They are distinctive people groups. Yes, we all belong to God. Yes, we all come to God in the same faith. Yes, we all get saved in the same way. But we have a distinctive purpose. Okay, one more, 2 more. Let me just try to wrap it up here, and I'll just do it this way because we're out of time and I don't want to keep people over too long. Okay, in 15 to 18, he says the nations will do what? They're going to do what over her?
Take up a lamentation.
Yeah. You know, if you didn't think it was ever going to happen, what God says in this prophecy is they will take up a lamentation over you. And when a lamentation is taken up, it's to weep in the sorrow of something, right? It's not a rejoicing thing. This is a lamentation of sorrow. And so...
But the other thing is they tremble.
Yeah. Yeah, so that was the thing that you should have picked up on here. All of the adjectives that are descriptive words concerning this lamentation. So yeah, tremble. What else? Groan. What else? They're going to be appalled. They're going to shake. Okay, so all those words, that's this lamentation they're going to take over her. It's a dirge, it's a funeral song, it's a song of sorrow. Always God has a purpose, even in his judgments. You know, his desire is to turn people. So while people are lamenting and having this great sorrow over it, they should be appalled. They should look at that and say, God said it all these years ago. God said it. We were all so doubtful. Here we are, and look at there. God did do it. It took him a while, but he did do it. And the patience of God is what in the New Testament? Salvation to some, right? The patience of God is salvation. So God is patiently waiting to unfold his plan, to bring it to fruition. And he does so that people might be saved along the way. That's his desire. The prophets composed many oracles and laments of destruction against Tyre for its arrogant pride as the greatest merchant of the sea, who handled the finest and the richest goods. So there's Isaiah, there's Jeremiah, there's Ezekiel, also Psalms. And I've got them on my chart here for you, so you can go back and look at those if you want to, where it isn't just Ezekiel talking about Tyre and having this proclamation. Other prophets also had done so. Tyre had gained enormous wealth through their outstanding wisdom, was another thing that was said in here. I think that's rather interesting. Joel and Zechariah talk about that. Okay. Thank you. Good segue, Carol. Didn't you hear one time somewhere that Tyre is related to Satan? It's coming. We're almost there. You're going to do your homework next week, and you're going to find it right there. And this is why I think doing it this way was really good, because we were able to lay down information about literal Tyre, right? Who she was, how the nations dealt with her, how God did that, so that they would know that he is the Lord, and that they will know that the Lord has spoken, and he does it. Once he speaks it, he will do it. So now he's saying that these nations are going to take up a lamentation over you. And then the last one is 19 to 21, and we're done. And this is Tyre of the sea again. And concerning Tyre of the sea, yeah, isn't this, and it will be covered by waters and never be found again. Now, we don't have time to really dig this out. I wanted to, but we are out of time. But you're right. The picture here is the pit. In this case, literal Tyre of the sea gets thrown into the water, into the depths of the deep, right? And you would maybe consider that a pit. But the spiritual side of this is the pit in Scripture is always making reference to who or to what? Say it again. To Sheol. That's exactly right. Sorry, my nose is dripping. I got choked on something. Okay. So, thus says the Lord, when, do you catch that word? When I make you a desolate city, like the cities which are not inhabited, when I bring up the deep over you and the great waters cover you. So once he's done that, then he says, then, so it's not, now he's not talking about the waters covering them. He's saying, then I will bring you the soul, you the person, you the evil one, right? I will bring you down with those who go down to the pit, to the people of old, and I will make you dwell in the lower parts of the earth, like the ancient waste places. Is this heaven? Is this the bosom of Abraham? No. Although this is Old Testament, and we still have the bosom of Abraham and Sheol. Sheol is the bigger picture. Within Sheol, the bosom of Abraham is one compartment. The inner compartment is the place of torment. You see that in Luke 16, if you want to go and read that about Lazarus and the rich man, and when they die, what happens to them. But he says, this is the pit. I'm going to send you down to the pit. So now he's covering it from two perspectives: a physical destruction of the evil city, and in this case, both the mainland and now the island, but also the spiritual destruction of their soul. He's talking about them. Not that the soul is destroyed. The soul lives forever, but it just lives forever in this pit. You will go down to the pit so that you will not be inhabited, but I will set glory in the land of the living. What a cool. So, huh?
What does that mean?
I see it because of the context here. In the contrast is the pit versus the land of the living. What would you, if you know the pit is speaking about spiritual death, what do you think the land of the living is speaking of? Spiritual life in heaven, right?
In relation to Tyre and the city, what is it
Okay.
physically?
Okay, well, that's why I'm saying I think there are two things going on here. They are talking about two things. There is a physical Tyre God is going to destroy. The water part, they get thrown into the depths of the sea, and the waters, physical waters, cover them. They're in that respect, they're in the pit. But then he's also speaking of something beyond that. He's speaking about a spiritual judgment that's going on for the soul of individuals.
I think it's to the people of old is kind of the key for that.
Yeah, sure.
Bring you down with those who go down to the people of old.
Yeah.
Not the land, not the earth.
Right. And it's those who dwell in the lower parts of the earth. What did Jesus say he was going to do when he died on the cross? Today I shall be in paradise. And what does Matthew prophesy? He will be like in the days of Jonah, 3 days and 3 nights where? In the belly of the earth. So that's what this is talking about, the belly of the earth, hell, Sheol. Now, at that time in history, because we're in the Old Testament still, Sheol contained both the believers and the unbelievers, but they were in different compartments. One compartment was called the bosom of Abraham. It was a pleasant place. It was a place of peace, and it was a place of fellowship with other believers. But then do you remember this in Luke 16? Okay, the other one is this part, the pit. It's talking about the belly of the earth. The inner part is part of it, which is a place of torment.
So verse 20 is all strictly spiritual?
Then I will bring you down with those who go down to the pit, to the people of old. I will make you dwell in the lower parts of the earth. That's Sheol. That is spiritual. Like the ancient waste places. So he's making a comparison. Do you see the word like? It's an imagery thing. Like the ancient waste places. With those who go down to the pit. So he's sending those into hell who belong there. So that you will not be inhabited. Now that's so that you will not be inhabited. Oh, so that the land will not be inhabited. The place of Tyre will no longer be inhabited, because he's using it as a demonstration to the land of the living, for one thing. Those who are still living are looking at Tyre today, to this very day. It's a lesson. And what does we learn? We know that I am the Lord. The Lord says, they will know that I am the Lord, and they will know that I, the Lord, have spoken, and I will do it. Now he's done it. We look at that, and we say, that land is never going to be inhabited. It's there to say to you, I said it, and I did it. That is supposed to help ensure that you will come to God in faith, that you will acknowledge who God is. Is that making sense? And so he's saying, and you will not be inhabited. You, the land, will not be inhabited again in this manner. Tyre of ancient Tyre was magnificent. It was powerful. It was wealthy beyond all wealth. All the kingdoms and all the people along those coastlines in particular, they fawned over them because they were so wealthy. And when God laid them waste, they groaned. They caused a lamentation. And he's saying it's so that you will not be inhabited. I'm going to do that so that people will see that, and they will know that what I have said is true. And also what I'm saying is true is those of you who reject me, those who, like, what was the one over here that says, you will be just like all the other nations. Oh, here. Moab, who said, Israel is just like all the other nations. And God is saying, no, I'm not. I'm going to do this to Tyre. You're going to see her bare and empty, and that's going to make you know that I am the Lord, and whatever I speak, it's going to happen. So it's a combination. He's using a demonstration of a physical place to show that he is the Lord. And he's saying about himself as the Lord, I'm going to judge your soul. And if you don't come to me in faith, if you don't bow your knee to me, he doesn't say that, but that's the implication here. He's saying you will go down to the pit with those people of old who also rejected me, like the days of Noah, which are recorded for us, right?
Kind of like he's talking about Tyre as the city, and then you going down to those as the individual.
Right. And in my title, this is called her doom. And it's also because this is the spiritual doom. This is the spiritual message behind all of this. When God does whatever he does in the world around us, he does it to demonstrate something to us. He wants it to be a picture or a way of alluring us into relationship with him, to recognize that he is the Lord, that he has spoken, that he does exactly what he says. All this is done so that people will come to him in faith. So when he does all these things that he's laying out here in this chapter to Tyre, you're going to look at Tyre, who is no longer going to be inhabited, and you're going to be reminded that he is the Lord. He spoke, he did it. It may have taken him hundreds of years, but he did that for a reason. I think a lot of it is he already sacked the mainland way back here by Babylon, and then all these years, how many people were saying, he didn't really mean it, it'll never happen. But also, how many people say, well, he said it, he did it, he will do it. Are we in the group that's looking at the unfulfilled pieces of prophecy right now in Scripture and saying, he's going to do it? And we're nodding our head in agreement with God. And that's what God wanted during this time frame, for people to be, he said it, he did it, he will do it, he hadn't done it yet, but I still believe he's going to do it. And he did, right? And so then he says, you will not be inhabited. That's going to be my witness. And I will set glory in the land of the living. I think it's a reference to eternal glory with those who will agree with God that God speaks and he does. Whatever he says he will do, he does. I'm sorry. I tried so hard to get through this quickly. Good questions, though, you guys. But the great thing is what this has done is set us up for the next 2 chapters homework. It's going to give you time to, now that you've had all this kind of parsed out so that you really get the flow and you see what really is going on here. Now when we get into the next 2 parts, it should be much easier for you because now you've got the historical Tyre handled. Now you're going to look at historical Tyre from it's going to give you a perspective of a spiritual picture in what's going on with Tyre as well. All right. Thank you, guys. See you next week.